Hello and welcome to another episode of Marriage with Tightrope. I'm Alan.
And I'm Katie.
And we're still married. Today we're joined by Mary and Dave Gravett. We're very excited to have you. Welcome to the show.
Hi.
Thank you. Welcome.
This is awesome. Dave and Mary, I say this each time we interview most people. A few of the interviews we've known the people a little bit better, but this is probably, take this as a badge of honor. This is the most blind we've walked into an interview.
It's going to be great.
It's going to be perfect. You can sabotage the whole thing. And they're actually they're apologists in disguise trying to hold you back, right? I think that's what's going on.
That would be bad.
I'm just kidding.
Yeah, we're excited to have you. Tell us where you live currently and a little bit about your family.
So we live in Mesquite, Nevada. We've lived here for 5 years. Oh, actually 6 years in Mesquite and 7 years in Nevada. And so we're in the heat. We both came from cooler places. I grew up in Flagstaff, and he grew up kind of all over the Pacific Northwest. So we actually don't like the heat in Nevada.
How much money have you made while you've been in Mesquite gambling?
Oh, I was like, that's a very personal question.
Oh, you meant gambling.
I said gambling.
$300.
Yeah.
Yes, we played bingo.
So let's average that over 7 years.
Right.
No, it was one game. We played twice, maybe three
times.
And the third time we played, we won $300, and we've never been back.
Right.
That's
Walk
smart.
away. Take that, gambling institutions.
That's right.
Right, exactly. Take the money and run.
And that's non-tithingable earnings.
Right. We did not pay tithing on
We did
that.
not.
Win-win. That's what I always learned growing up, is you don't pay tithing on, anyway. That's
On gambled money?
I was probably in
No, that's true.
That's got to be like right along with like the no face cards in the home.
Yeah, it's got to be on
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Yeah, it is.
But we digest. Yeah, let's get back to, so great. So where are you from? Flagstaff, and then Dave, you're from the...
Washington State mainly. Eastern, Western. We bounced around.
Great. Tell us briefly about your upbringing and up to that moment that you guys met. I'm sure you met at the same college, not rivals whatsoever or anything like that.
We'll get to that. So I'll start. I born in the church. My mom is a lifelong member. My dad joined the church in the service. Pretty standard LDS upbringing, I would say. Baptized when I was 8. Checked all the boxes all the way through. Went on a mission at 19 and got back. Did an undergraduate at Brigham Young University, studied history, and then went to law school at the University of Utah, and that's when I met Mary.
So tell me,
Nice.
Dave, your dad was a convert, you said, right? He joined
Correct.
when he was in the service. So, I mean, I'm sure you've been around lots of LDS people growing up. Was there anything unique or different that your dad brought to your home that would have been different than a non-traditional home?
I don't think so. Definitely there were stories. Like one of his favorite stories to tell was that when he first joined the church, he had no concept of keeping the Sabbath day holy. So he would come to church with a surfboard on top of his car and a wetsuit in the back seat, go to sacrament, and then he'd suit up and head out to the waves. And finally somebody told him you weren't supposed to do that. So there were stories like that. He told a story about he spent a lot of time in the South Pacific in the service, and he met a Catholic priest who was a super, super cool dude. His family were not members, and so we would go and spend time with them, and there would be moderate amounts of alcohol imbibed and a few PG-13 swear words uttered. His mom, my grandma, well, both of them actually, my grandma and grandpa were devout atheists. Is that the word for it? They were strong atheists. They were adamant in atheism. And so that always made for some interesting visits. I remember my grandma was allowed to call me on my mission because she was dying. She was always dying, but they didn't know that in the mission office. Anyway, she told me that the best thing I could do on my mission was learn about the culture and then come back and get a good education. So that was kind of her take on the church. They were very opposed to the church early after my dad joined, and sort of softened up over time as they saw, I think, that his kids turned out okay. I think we turned out okay anyway.
Yeah, that would be actually like a really interesting thing to have your dad go from an atheist home to like a fully believing in God and Jesus Christ, very devout Mormon family. That's a huge shift for him.
His story is very interesting, and I think that was made more interesting by the fact that my mom came from pioneer stock. Her mom, my maternal grandma, was a Baptist and joined the Mormon Church, but her dad, he can trace his genealogy back to Kirtland and Nauvoo and whatnot. So yeah, it was an interesting mix. It didn't seem odd to me because it was, and I don't think it really was that odd, but it's the only life, I've ever known.
Yeah.
So in general, I would say there were some aspects of our upbringing that was very strict LDS, and then others that were, I don't know what strict and lax, but, it's just it was an interesting mix because my mom came from her background, which was Baptist, devout Baptist, and then Mormon, and then pioneer Mormon, and then my dad from really no religious background at all.
Wow, that's super interesting. Yeah. All right, Mary, what about you? Take us through a little bit of you and how you grew up, and then take us to where you and your husband met.
Okay, so I'm one of 8 children in my family. My mom felt very strongly she was to have 8 children, that.
From the beginning, that was her. She did it.
She just knew it and she went for it. So, one of a big group of kids, and I grew up mostly in Flagstaff. I moved there when I was 6. So it's kind of a liberal town. Mm-hmm. And so our family is a very strange mix of liberal and conservative ideology because my parents, like many Arizonans, are very into guns and, they're very into their conservative rights. But then they're also really into recycling and taking care of the earth. And it's kind of a funny mix.
Pick up your shell casings and recycle.
Right, exactly. Like I said, I was toward the younger end, and I feel like my parents were kind of more strict and very that very dogmatic Mormon parent, at the beginning with their older kids, and then they were really relaxed and were a delight for me and my younger sister. And then I went to BYU. I always wanted to go on a mission, and so that first year, 2 years at BYU, I just went and did classes, and but the whole time I was ready to go on my mission. I was preparing for that. And then came home to Flagstaff and got ready and went on my mission. I went to Nauvoo, to the visitor center, which was awesome.
Wow.
Then came back to BYU, and I was like, okay, now it's time to get married, right? Didn't find Dave until after we'd both graduated. It was that I graduated, or the month after I graduated, I came back from Christmas break to BYU, and no one was back yet. And a guy in my ward was like, you've got to come play games with me and some people. And he was the very good high school friend of Dave. And so we met playing Risk.
Yes. And we don't usually tell people that because that's kind of embarrassing, kind of a point of pride. It depends on who you're talking to.
It's a little.
Well, that's embarrassing. The question is, who won Risk, and how long did it take?
Did it finish?
Yeah.
Oh. We spent about 6 hours playing that game. He was out before I was, but he gave me the advice that I should have. Yeah, you were. It was down. Yes, it was down to me and Jason.
You remember this quite clearly.
Let's just move on.
And you have to go after Jason first thing or he'll win. And it's true. Jason won. He always won.
Dang it, Jason. Where is he now? No, it doesn't matter.
He's still our really good friend.
Oh, good.
Okay.
It does matter.
So,
Yeah.
Mary, I actually have a question for you. Tell me something that was unique or really interesting about your service in Nauvoo, because I think that is a unique experience in and of itself.
Yeah.
But also, I think that I've never been there, and
Neither
Alan
have I.
hasn't either. And so, anyway, tell us about that.
One thing is that I got to go to the temple as often as I wanted to, as long as I had a companion to go with me. We lived in houses of like, one house had 10 sisters all together in it, and then another had 6. Then there were some sisters living in Carthage. And as long as I had one of those sisters who was willing to go with me, and we were not assigned to be in the visitor center during those certain times, I could go. There was no proselyting in Nauvoo. And so there was a lot of downtime. When I was first endowed, I was not totally comfortable with all that goes on in the temple. And I decided I'm going to make myself comfortable. I'm going to keep going back, and I'm going to do this until I think this is comfortable for me. And so I loved that I was able to go so often on my mission. And I love the Nauvoo temple. It's just gorgeous. And it really is like my home temple, you know?
Yeah.
But Nauvoo was so interesting. Like, we got to actually have pioneer dresses made for us, and we got to serve in the historic sites and give tours. But then we also got to be in the visitor center and, bear our testimonies as we're showing videos of the prophets. And it was just really great experience. I loved it.
That's cool.
That is cool. I think we'll revisit this because I want to get to some of the story, because I think that it'd be an interesting perspective of you serving in Nauvoo and your husband's going through a faith transition. So anyway, we'll get to that. But Dave, why don't you take us through, when did you get married? What year did you get married? And a little bit through like your beginning years of marriage.
Okay. So as Mary said, we met in the winter of,
it was January 2009.
January 2009.
Got it.
We met on the 2nd of January 2009, the 3rd of January 2009. And it was just, and we don't need to belabor this point. This is a marriage on a tightrope podcast, not a how did you guys get together podcast. So I won't belabor the point, but
now you got to do it. Come on, we got to. We love hearing it.
We'll get to the tightrope. We'll
yeah.
get there.
So I'll just tell one story that I think captures what Mary brings to the marriage for me. So I everybody after that game night, I was like, oh, I want to get to know this girl, and several of my friends were like, dude, she's just she's way out of your league. But I persisted, and I asked her on a date, and she agreed to go. And I told her we were going to go sledding. Now, are you guys familiar with Provo? Did either of you go to BYU?
Yep, we both did.
Okay. So you know that you can go sledding kind of in town. There's a couple of parks with decent sized hills.
Yeah.
But I had never done that. And I graduated from high school in Utah, so I kind of knew the mountains a bit. So in my mind, when I said we're going sledding, I meant we're going to take some snowshoes and hike up to the side of a mountain and do some sledding. Mary figured we would go to a hill in a neighborhood nearby. So she was wearing and this was thoughtless me, I didn't even look. She was wearing tennis shoes, I think, low-rise tennis shoes. So we get up there and there's 1.5 feet of snow, and I still don't notice. And she's just trucking along, and we get up there and I look down, and it is clear that I think she's in the early stages of frostbite down there.
Oh, no.
Word. And she's just having a great time and laughing and
it was a good time.
So anyway, she invariably finds the positive about everything and doesn't, she's not a whiner. And anyway, so that was, after that date, I was like, man, I think I want to marry this girl.
Wow.
So anyway, so we get married in August of 2009. I'm a second-year law student at that point, and she is a first-year master's student. So we lived in South Jordan in her auntie's basement. And oh man, there's some stories we could tell about that. But And I would take the train north, and she would take the bus south.
Because I was going to BYU.
Right. And I was...
You're doing a master's there.
Yeah.
You, right?
Yeah, I went to the University of Utah Law School. And so...
Crosstown lovers.
Yeah, like the Sharks and the Jets or something like that. So anyway, we did that for 2 years, and then I graduated in April of 2011, and as you guys will recall, nobody was hiring anybody at that point.
Yeah.
So I found a posting for a job in a place called Pahrump, Nevada, and I was applying everywhere. Like I applied for jobs in the South Pacific, in like Alaska, and the judge called me and offered me the job, and so I went down there. We basically moved down there sight unseen, and it was kind of like Mad Max Thunderdome, just like a post-apocalyptic wasteland.
Pahrump is not a pleasant place. Let's just leave it at that.
Yeah. So
I've never even heard of Pahrump.
Yeah, neither have I.
Have you been to Vegas before?
Yes.
Okay, so if you're in Vegas and you look over at Mount Charleston, that's the biggest mountain there in the valley.
West of Vegas.
Yeah, west of Vegas. It's just on the other side of that mountain.
And it's where they have the brothels. So you're not allowed to have brothels in Las Vegas, in Clark County. So it's like just over the county line. And yeah.
Yeah, that says all you need to know. Anyway, we're not here to, this isn't a podcast about Pahrump. It'd be like a 2-episode podcast. But anyway.
Part 2 is going to be all about the brothels. We're going to ask you questions.
The post-Mormon perspective. No, I'm just kidding. So anyway, so then we decided to have a kid because there was nothing to do in Pahrump.
So that's why.
And then around the same time, Mary said, we need to get out of Pahrump or I'm going to explode. And so I was doing the same thing, applying jobs anywhere, everywhere. And this little job here in Mesquite came up, and I had always liked driving through Mesquite, especially when I was on my way to Pahrump. I thought, oh, this could be a nice place. So I went, and we've been in Mesquite ever since.
What kind of law do you do?
Whatever pays.
Love that.
I have a small contract with the municipality here to do prosecution. So I have a badge. Do a little bit of, you were supposed to be more impressed by that, but that's okay.
Law and order.
And then I do a little bit of family law, which is kind of a double speak for divorce law.
Yeah.
And then mainly basic business, civil litigation, contracts, torts, that kind of stuff.
Great.
Gotcha.
Great.
Nice.
So you're in Mesquite, and you're happier, Mary, that you're in Mesquite?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Mesquite is a beautiful little town. It was settled by Mormons. There's lots of Mormons here. I'm sorry, members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. There are just some really good people here. They take pride in the community. That's what I really feel like is the biggest thing. Is like they have community events. They keep it clean. It's a great place. If it weren't for the heat of Nevada, we would probably stay here forever.
Right. Okay.
So Mary, tell us, what your life is like there in Mesquite, and when do things start to take a turn? I mean, how's your life in the church, and then when do things start changing?
In the church, we just have like normal callings. It seems like Dave always got the young man's callings a lot.
Because you're young.
Done a little bit of everything, like teaching in Relief Society and in Sunday school, and a lot of choir callings, leading choir. And I haven't really done primary since we had kids, which is kind of surprising.
They can tell.
And just, we generally have just had like a normal, peaceful life. Dave hasn't, for our whole marriage, hasn't really been the lead us to family prayer and family scripture study. Like I've usually been the one to bring that up each time. Although lately he's been a lot more in, bringing us to that. Actually, I think that his faith transition has made him like maybe the more into his faith person in our marriage, honestly, but
we're getting ahead of ourselves.
Yeah. Okay. Anyway, so, but we're just chugging along, doing the normal thing in the church with, our normal callings. And I understood that I was more invested in the church. I'm the one who was interested in going to the temple, and usually Dave would not. So I was used to going to the temple by myself, especially with kids. Like, it's like one parent stays home and one parent goes. And we always have lived, except for when we lived in South Jordan, we've always lived about an hour away from the temple. So it's easier to go alone. So I just knew that there was like different levels of interest there and various church things. But it wasn't until last fall really that things changed. So I'll turn the time over to Dave.
The worm turned, as it was. Just to interject here, I think that for me, from my perspective during this time, I felt like I was giving it 110%, because from my perspective, I had struggled with just the specific, I would say, the specific truth claims of the church. I was doing it anyway. I wanted to, be in. I had always struggled with the temple. I went, of course, when I was in Dowd, and when I was in Provo, I would go occasionally, but it never really did anything for me. Well, we can get into that later, I guess. But so from my perspective, I think I was giving it 110%, but where I didn't have that fire in the belly, is that the word for it? I didn't have a belief in these truth claims, and so it was hard to even give what I gave. And so I had been struggling for a long time with just feeling like, as to this, for instance, the Book of Mormon and some of the specific truth claims of the church, I just didn't feel like it was plausible. And it felt like I had to make up all of these explanations for why this would happen and this would happen and this would happen. And just to keep all of those plates spinning in the air, it was kind of exhausting. And I decided that I would go to the temple, because that's where you're supposed to go to get spiritual enlightenment. And it had been probably about a year since I had gone before. And I just went one evening, and as I'm sitting there, I remember very clearly it was the point at which the female attendees are instructed to veil their faces. I just really felt like I needed to get out of there. It felt not just like it wasn't doing anything for me. I just felt really uncomfortable, and like I just needed to go. I didn't leave, which whatever. But that was when I started to really think, well, maybe this isn't for me. Maybe it isn't something I can believe in. And a few months after that, or a few weeks after that, I started to think, well, maybe none of this is true. Maybe this is all just something that we've, as humanity, have put together with our pattern-seeking brains. And I was really thinking about that and praying, and just not feeling any sort of light or knowledge as to the church being true, or that it was a place where I was even supposed to be. And so it was in October, I think, or maybe early November. We were laying in bed one night, and I said to Mary, I said, "You know what, honey, I think I might be an atheist." She was pretty shook by that.
Yeah. Imagine, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, go back to their face.
So that was just, he turned over and says, "Honey, I think I might be an atheist." Mary, what's going on?
I want to interject one quick question. So now we've gotten to the tightrope.
Yeah.
Right? We've gotten to this. Yeah. This is the most vulnerable part of sharing your story, as how it, in that moment and moving onward, how you've been able to deal with everything. So the question I want to ask, that what makes you want to share this? What makes you want to hop on a Skype call with two people you don't know to broadcast your story? Like, are you hoping, I'll ask you, Mary, are you hoping to get something personally out of it? Are you hoping to share this with others? What are you hoping to get out of all this?
I'm hoping to share our story because when I first heard this from Dave, and over many conversations later, I felt really alone, and I felt just a lot of different emotions. And then I had a friend recommend your podcast to me, and it was like a lifeline. It was just really, really good to not only, I mean, I knew I wasn't alone, but to just hear other people and just know that there are people who understand both of us. We're going through something that is, not terrible. It's not horrible. This is not something that should be terribilized. We are two people who love each other, who have a lot of things in common, and one major difference, I mean, there are other differences too, but they're really not important, And so I gained a lot from listening to other people's stories. And so the reason why I reached out to you is because I feel like I want to give back. I want to be able to share that the terrible doesn't last forever.
Right. And I think we have, we're new to this, I guess, relatively new, but I think we've found some things that work for us that maybe might help others who are in the same boat.
That is awesome. Thank you for taking a second before we get back to the timeline to explain that. That's really feels great to hear. And also there's people that will connect with your story in ways that they can't connect with anyone else's. And so just putting yourself out there is awesome. It's why we do this. And it's why I'm so vocal on Facebook, is because there's people out there that don't know that there's other people feeling this way. So thank you. Yeah. All right. So he turns to you in bed.
Just the old oh, honey, by the way, so Mary, what's going on?
That's literally exactly how it came out.
Yeah. Really? Oh, wow.
I was pretty blindsided. And I feel like I'm very short-tempered sometimes, but this was one instance where I just was just quiet, just listening. I feel like that's been one of my biggest go-tos in going through all of this is, if I'm not sure what to say, I should probably not say anything, because I don't want something bad, something that I can't take back, to come out of my mouth. So I think that I just kind of listened and...
Yeah, you asked a few questions, and we talked about it over the course of a few days, I think. I don't remember what you said, but I realized that you were falling down a precipice, and
it was scary.
And so I said, you know what? Never mind. Forget it. I that was crazy talk.
JK.
Just kidding.
Oh, well.
Basically, step back. I'm gonna do everything I've done before, and you don't have to worry about this. Let's just pretend like this never happened. And
how long did that last? Till the beginning of the year. Right?
Yeah, it was until January. So through November and December into the middle of January.
Yeah.
And we just never talked about it. We just never talked about it.
November, December of January of this year.
Yeah.
Wow.
So just 2.5 months of I'm thinking and stewing, and he is too. This is his biggest crisis moment, is through those couple of months, because now he's thinking, well, I now know I'm not supposed to be in this church, but I've got to stay in this church,
Right.
And I mean, I don't want to be putting words in your mouth.
That's true. That's accurate.
And I am just wondering what is going to happen. We're not communicating about it. And so I don't know what's going to happen next. I don't know if he's going to go back to, being an atheist. Honestly, there's no going back on that. He is, we're just not talking about it, so we're just tiptoeing around it. And I went into a depression. I have been through depression before, but this was one time where I was well, I'm really not in control of this. You never really are, but it was situational. but I had no control over the situation. And so it wasn't until Dave decided to make a change, we actually started talking about it. And even though that meant that there were changes and we had to actually face the reality of what was happening, I have been slowly coming out of that depression because we've actually been talking. We've been able to have that connection over a difficult topic, but at least it's connection, you know?
Right. So around the end of January, I said, basically, I can't keep doing this. It's painful for me to do these things that not only do I not believe, but I feel like aren't even right for me to be doing. And that, you know, the kind of the everything along with the temple, the garments and all of that. So I said, you know what, I think I need to stop wearing these garments. I don't know what's going to come after that, but I can't do this anymore. And an interesting thing kind of happened for me, and I think I may be unique in this, and we're still kind of in the middle of this, but once I was able to give up the things that I knew weren't true, or at least that felt to me weren't true, it became a lot more bearable even to go to church and to I don't want to say participate because I don't fully participate, but we go to church on Sunday, and Mary still reads the Book of Mormon with the kids, and when she's away, we read. She doesn't know this, but we read comic books. No, I'm just kidding. We read out of the Bible, and it's working. And I think being able to give up the things that I didn't believe in opened a space for me to find things that I did believe in and that I do believe in that I'm working on now.
Yeah, when he talked to me in January, said, if I can let go of these basic truth claims of the church that I don't believe in, then I feel like there's room for me to have faith in God and Jesus Christ again. And like in one way that was like kind of like a slap, you know, I'm like, okay, this feels like a rejection of me, which I know it's not, but it was hard. It was a little hurtful, but at the same time I was like, okay, yes, I want you to have a relationship with God in Christ. I want you to do what you need to do to have a relationship with God in Christ. And so that was like my hope, like, okay, then we're going to move forward with this. You're going to have a faith transition, and I'm going to support you in the things that you explore so that you can develop your faith in God and Christ.
So Dave, I want to know, and I think a lot of listeners would love to know, because I think for Alan especially, I don't want to put words in your mouth.
Do it.
But it's been very difficult for Alan to have a relationship with God and Jesus Christ. It's because he's had kind of a soured experience. And so I would love to hear your thoughts on what that looks like for you.
Good question. A big part of it for me is I didn't come to this place by way of the kind of warts and bruises and ugly parts of the church's history. I mean, I know that stuff's out there, and I am aware of it, and it is what it is, but I never had this moment of feeling like, oh my gosh, I've been deceived this whole time. I think that that's been good for me, because I can say this is a set of beliefs that I was raised in, that a lot of people believe, that just it doesn't work for me, to paraphrase a previous podcast. And so I'm not angry at religion. I've just reached a point where these things don't work for me. And the second thing is that because I kind of came to my faith crisis through the way I felt, rather than what, again, rather than these secrets about the church that they weren't telling me. I still have this idea that I can rely on my feelings to lead me to truth. So that's one part of it. The second part of it is this. I think that for me, spirituality has to be a part of my life. It's kind of like, for me, it's like exercise. I mean, everybody says if you exercise, you live longer. I don't believe that. I think I'll probably die whenever I'm going to die, but I exercise anyway because it's good for me. And I think for me, at least, I have this feeling that spirituality, for me to be a mentally and emotionally stable and happy person, it needs to be a part of my life in some way. I don't know what that's going to look like 5 or 10 years from now. I think it might involve some kind of participation in an organized religion, just because that's easier than checking out a bunch of philosophy books from the library and going up into the mountains and sitting on a rock and reading them.
That sounds nice too.
Yeah.
Yeah, it does sound nice. But boy, when I put it like that.
No kids.
No kids. Ooh, so that's kind of, that's one of the big ways that I'm approaching it, is that I want to be happy. And I think that I need to be spiritually exercised, for lack of a better phrase, in order to be happy. So that's kind of why I'm choosing the route of faith, a faith experience, post-Mormon. If I was in a position where I had the same sort of negative reactions to talks or reading about God or reading in the Bible as I do about the Book of Mormon, or if I felt the same way reading the Bible as I do when I read the Book of Mormon, that wouldn't work for me. I'm not sure why I don't feel that way, but I think I can still get some wisdom out of it. And so that's kind of where I'm at right now. Does that answer the question?
I think that does. Yeah. I think it doesn't matter. I think it's just wherever you're at. And so I really like that answer. Mary, how do you feel about all of this?
There are still some times where I'm sad. Obviously, like, it's not been very long since this started.
Yeah.
Like,
short, yeah.
Is definitely, I would liken it to a grieving process, because there are parts of my marriage and my future life that I imagined and thought were givens, which shame on me for thinking that, but just things that I thought, and now it's never going to be that way. And so I have to process that. I have to grieve that. And I know it hasn't been easy for Dave either. He's been going through a grieving process as well, because, his life is not how he thought it was going to be. And so we're both going through that. And I think we just have to give each other a lot of grace. We just have to be understanding. So that's like the balance, is like, sometimes I will express feelings of sadness, and that's hard for Dave to hear, because it's like, I don't know.
You did this to me.
Yeah, okay. I didn't want to say you think that.
Right.
But it's like, it is a hard experience, especially, well, not especially. We've told my family. We haven't told his yet.
We've tried, and they thought I was joking, and so it didn't go well. But
he tried with one of his sisters. He's a big joker. He frequently will try to pull these elaborate pranks and convince people, and so I don't blame her for not believing him.
Yeah, neither.
The boy who cried wolf.
Yes, no, that is me.
That one experience turned him off from telling his family.
Right. Maybe we'll send them a link to this episode, and that's how they can find out.
Yeah,
maybe.
She says.
Maybe you could share with them in their own time, and when you get to it. Mary, how's your family been for you? Have they been supportive? And
do they know?
You just said that you told your family, right?
Yeah, they know.
Your side, no. Okay.
Yeah, they've been pretty supportive. I've received some very bad advice from some individuals. But for the most part, they have been very supportive, very loving. It helps that of, the 8 of us children, several have left the church, among my siblings.
4 out of the 8, right?
And then 2 have come back.
Right.
Or like even one of them is back in the church, but he has really varying levels of activity.
Sure.
So I think my family was very understanding because
Not their first rodeo.
Yeah.
You weren't the first one to make the wave.
Right. Whereas with my family, I will be the first one to be like, I mean, there have been other family members who have lessened their activity at various times, but I'll be the first one to say, guys, I'm out. So.
And really no concrete plans on when and how that's going to happen.
Soon.
Right. He keeps saying.
I didn't make the first waves in my family, but I did make the first waves in Katie's. And so one has been more difficult than the other.
Right.
And just so you know, and not just in our case, but in the great majority of cases that people we've spoken to, it generally gets much better over time. And the hardest part is the beginning.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's why I'm putting off that beginning.
I know. Can't you just skip to 6 months in? What's the deal?
Right.
So let me ask this question of kind of both of you at the same time. I'll ask you first, Mary. At any point during this, was there any attempt to pull the other person to their side of, no, Dave, you can't do this? And then we'll ask that question first. And if the answer is no, which visually I think I'm getting some indications of, this is an audio podcast.
That's right.
Why not?
I think that first few months of just total silence, but knowing Dave was not believing, but he was still doing all of the things.
I was the Sunday school president, and I was giving gospel doctrine lessons.
Yeah. Which is, we're in the New Testament year, so I was like, you can keep doing that. I just knew that we were both in such pain. I would not want to try to pull him back into the church. Number one, I don't think I could do it. I can't make him believe what he won't and can't believe. And then number two, I just wouldn't want to cause him what I know is pain. I accepted for as long as I could him saying, nothing's going to change. I accepted that time that he was still coming to the church, and he is still coming to church. But once he said, I don't believe, it was easier for us to just move forward from that point.
Right. And in one of our first conversations, we talked about this very thing. And I said, I don't think our marriage could survive me trying to push you out of the church or you trying to pull me back in. And so from that, we kind of developed what we call our push-pull rule. She doesn't try to pull me in, and I don't try to push her out. And, there have been times when, something crazy will come up in the news. It's been a crazy 6 months for Mormon news.
Yeah.
Or, there have been times where either one of us could have reneged on that agreement that we made. And we've, I think, done pretty well at resisting the urge.
Yeah. There have been times where I've been hurt by some of the things that the church has announced. I'm also pleasantly surprised by some too.
Sure. There's been good things.
But and when I express my feelings about the church, if they're negative, then Dave is really supportive.
Silent.
Yes, mostly just silent. To be supportive.
Yeah, that's awesome and difficult because you hear them saying things that you have thought and felt and said, and you just want to jump on top and be like, yeah. And did you know? And ooh, did you know that also? Ooh. And that causes, Mary and Katie in this case to shut down. And
yeah, I double down. I do. I like, then I feel like I have to defend, and
that has happened a couple of times with us.
Sure.
Of course. Here. That will absolutely happen. And it continues sometimes to happen. But yeah, silence, that's a really powerful tool to use, especially when you're allowing your spouse to express positive or negative emotion. For Mary, do you have a support system or a cheerleader or someone you can talk to, or have you through the process?
I've done a little bit of talking with my sisters, some with a friend here in Mesquite. I don't have like my one go-to person, except for Dave. Like, he really is my best friend.
Yeah, of course.
And I feel like I'm not really that critical of him. And so I don't really need someone aside to vent to that much about him.
Maybe more of a shoulder to cry on would be good.
Yeah.
It's true, because he really does get down when I'm feeling down. So I have not found like a really good person to do that with.
I think like everyone process things differently, right? Some people, especially some people who are more introverted, they can deal with some of these things on their own because they want to keep it to themselves. They're private people. It's easier for them. But I think the majority of people that I speak with really just need a cheerleader, someone that will be positive and, will listen with empathy and then say, you can do it. And I think everyone needs that. And I hope that I'm open.
I hope I find someone like that.
You can text me anytime. I can't tell you how many women in my circle that we text, and we're having a bad Sunday. I'll just text one of them randomly and they'll say, I'm sorry, that sucks. And let's talk about it later. So anyway, open invitation.
Perfect. What did I do?
Things are hard. I mean, as you know, you get through some of the thick of this, but then it comes in waves. You'll feel it crash on you when you tell Dave's family, or maybe when closer friends and family, or even in the outer rims of the circle start hearing your story. It'll come in waves. So I hope that for you, because it's important to have someone. But until then, we will exchange numbers after so that you can text me.
Thank you.
Mary, you mentioned a little earlier that even though you're in just a few months into this, you've already kind of found some things that are very helpful. I think you've already mentioned some of them, but what other things have both of you found that have been helpful in this crazy journey?
Mm-hmm.
One thing that is really helpful, like I said, is that I feel like we can still share a big portion of our faith. Dave is still, trying to develop and keep, I would say not develop, but keep his faith in God and Christ. And so that is nice. He's talking about going to another church soon, and so that's like probably one of those hurdles that I'm gonna have some hard times with that. But I think it's positive that we can both have that part of our lives that is our faith, and so that has been a help for me. I know that's not going to be the same for everyone, but I think building on common ground is something that everyone can do. If your common ground isn't religion, then it can be
find something.
Yes, for sure. It can be, I don't want to say your children, because eventually your children grow up, but it can be, sports. It can be getting out in nature. It can be music. You find common ground.
Right.
Go ahead.
No, you go ahead.
No, go ahead.
Okay, I'll go ahead.
You.
I was going to jump to the next thing. So
yeah, go ahead.
Ready for that. One thing that I have really been working on, this isn't in the outline, but I'm going to tell it anyway, is to be not only supportive, but enthusiastic about what is going on for Mary in the church. And I mean, there are some things that I can't be enthusiastic about, but most of them they're, at least from my perspective now, most of them are just from harmless in they're at least benign, and I can be enthusiastic about those things. And if she wants to go to the temple on a Thursday night, not only am I going to say, yeah, I can do that, I'll say, hey, would you like to go to the temple this Thursday night? I can get out of work early. We'll make it happen. Because it's important to her. And even though it isn't important to me, she is important to me. And so I want to enthusiastically support the things that are important to her. And I hope that, when the time comes to go to a new church, she'll do the same for me.
Yeah.
Fingers crossed.
Is there anything else? Any other things that have been helpful?
One big one. So when Dave was talking in January about changes, he talked about, things he wanted to do. And then there were some changes that were made
right away,
very quickly.
That night.
I thought that there was still going to be a discussion period, and there was not. It was scary. It was kind of a scary time. Even though I was feeling more positive, we were talking more, and I thought, okay, he can have this, faith. It was a time where I was also like, the ground is shifting under my feet. I don't know what's going to happen next. And I actually developed anxiety. I didn't recognize it myself, but Dave was like, you have had an anxiety attack. And we talked a lot about my fears. And Dave offered to give me 6 months advance notice before any new changes, which is a long lead. He's a lawyer, so we have also decided that applies to me as well. So if, I decided to become a temple ordinance worker, it's not like I'm getting his permission. I'm just bringing it up well in advance so that we can both come to terms and adapt to what needs to happen. Or when he decides to join a new church, he's going to bring it up well in advance. We're going to, really, I've already come to terms with it, but maybe that was a bad example. But.
Well, I think tithing is one that, it's one of those things where it's like, yeah, I think I would prefer that my half of our joint income go to something I really believe in and support, but I'm not going to I make the lion's share of the income, but I couldn't do it without her. So anyway, I'm not going to pull that rug out from under you tonight. I'll give you 6 months notice. So that's kind of and maybe there would be things that wouldn't apply to, but I'm having a hard time thinking of something that I would need to change now.
Right.
I'm going to come home and say, I need a beer tonight.
I've never heard of kind of the warning, the time range warning, which is, hey,
I like it.
However it works for you guys.
Yeah.
Katie and I, our talk was more, hey, I'll let you know. There's a few things that I don't feel I need to do. But if it gets to a point where it's like, no, I'm done not doing this, or I'm done doing that, I'll let you know. And so the communications are open, and that's been a pretty good system for us. So I think you find something that works for you and go with it.
Tell me, how old are your kids?
They are 6, 4, and almost 2.
Okay. So have you put a time limit, or have you talked about what that future looks like with them?
Our oldest is very curious, and I think she got Dave's and his grandmother's doubting gene, as we call it. And so we have talked through, we want to have discussions that are emphasizing that we are a family that is very open to other ideas. And we haven't told our kids yet about Dave's faith transition because his parents are our babysitters. And we have to tell them first.
It's all tied together.
Yeah.
Right.
I also want to have a clear picture of where I'm headed before we put them on the ship, so to speak. But yeah, we've talked about what that conversation will look like with them. They're young enough that I think if they were teenagers and we were like, oh, hey kids, dad doesn't believe anymore, like foundation's crumbling.
You imagine.
I'm imagining. Yeah. Maybe they would be like, right on, dad, I'm with you. I don't know. Yeah, we are going to have that conversation with them, and we want it to be a positive conversation. Like, hey, now you have options. I don't know, but we want that was a joke. Getting the look. But anyway, yeah, we have talked about what we're going to say to our kids and how it's going to work. And more than anything else, we want them to know that we love them. Mary has something that works for her. I'm going to have something that works for me. And we're all going to work together is kind of how we want to pitch it.
We have already talked to them about, various actions that are prohibited by the church that we see people around us doing, and our daughter, our oldest, will bring them up kind of in a negative way. And even though I fully support those things, I emphasize to her, that person is doing the best that they know and can, and we can still love them, and we can still think that they're a great person. I'm laying that foundation so that when our religious paths diverge, then I want our kids to love their dad and accept him no matter what. And so we're working on that.
And vice versa. Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, I love that. And it's hard to tell. I think, Alan and I, we always build up ourselves thinking it's going to be this big thing with our kids. And then we talk to them and they're like, okay, cool dad, cool mom.
I watch TV again. Come on.
I know. Can I get back to the PS4? But honestly, yeah, I think that what you're doing is totally right. Laying the groundwork, talking to them now, being open. I think that's all part of it. So it will only do good things in the future for you.
We're hoping so.
That's the hope.
Well, is there anything else that we didn't ask or cover that you wanted to say?
Bring that outline back up.
Yeah.
I'm doing it right now, man.
Good.
Tell the world. Yeah, one thing that I would add is that, so in that January conversation, I ditched the, so weird to talk about garments, but I ditched them. And then Mary was really stressed out and depressed and crying and anxious. So over the course of a few days. Right. So I was like, oh, never mind again. And that made things even worse. So I would say that.
Yeah, I did. I did that too.
Yeah.
Yeah. Waffling on major life decisions is probably not useful for your spouse. So, for me, I would have been better had I gotten to a point where she was ready and I was ready and it was just a clean break. I think with these things, a clean break is better than a messy one.
It is.
We've learned that lesson and we're moving forward positively.
Yeah.
But thanks for having us on, guys.
No, of course. Katie, anything else from you?
I think we really appreciate you coming on and sharing your story. I think that the more people share, the better you feel about your life, really, because you're not alone, one, and two, you can connect with other opinions, other insights that you hadn't thought of before. And I think we gain so much more out of these than anyone else. Like for Alan and I, it's just so refreshing to hear other people tell their story. So I really appreciate you reaching out to us and doing this, because if it blesses no other lives, it blessed us tonight. And so thank you so much for doing that. I feel really good listening to everything you said. And certainly lots of helpful things.
Yeah, well, and we really appreciate you guys. We know this is hopefully a labor of love for you, but certainly a lot of time and effort goes into it. So we appreciate you, and thanks for having us on.
Of course. Thank you. This has been Marriage on a Tightrope. Follow us on our Facebook group and our Instagram. You already know what it is because it's just our podcast name. You can also email us at marriageonatightrope@gmail.com. And to support the podcast, you can go to marriageonatightrope.org. There's a donate button midway down on the right. Thanks for listening. Dave and Mary, thank you so much.
Have a good night.